Okay, get ready, because we are diving deep today into some seriously out there ideas. You sent over some research on artificial fluency, and wow, the title alone told me this was going to be good.
It's a rabbit hole for sure, but a fascinating one.
It goes way beyond just, making AI sound smart. It's about, like, I don't know, building systems, maybe even ourselves, that actually get stronger when things get messy. Not just survive chaos, but actually gain from it. Ever heard the term anti-fragile?
Yeah, definitely. It really makes you rethink how you see challenges.
Right. Like, what if instead of being scared of uncertainty, we could actually benefit from it? This research says it all starts with understanding how we think, how we grow.
And it goes even deeper than that, I think. It's looking at how we grow as individuals,
Mm.
but also how that ties into like the evolution of whole societies and how understanding all of that could be the secret sauce to building AI that actually makes a difference.
Okay, so hold on to your hats, everyone, because this is where it gets wild.
Oh.
This document dives into the work of the psychologist Robert Keegan. He came up with these stages of adult development, right?
Yep.
And I mean, we don't usually think of grown-ups going through stages, but hear me out.
It's easy to think once you're an adult, your brain is basically done.
Hmm.
But Keegan's research says not so fast.
Exactly. And according to him, most of us, we kind of get stuck before we reach the really interesting levels, the self-authoring and self-transforming stages, he calls them.
And those stages, that's where things get really juicy, especially when we're talking about anti-fragility.
Okay, so what's so special about these later stages? What can people at those levels do that the rest of us can't?
Well, imagine being able to really examine your own beliefs, your biases even, but with a
Hmm.
critical eye, to be able to consider different viewpoints at the same time without feeling threatened. It's like, upgrading your mental software to handle just how complex the world is.
It's like when you finally clean out your downloads folder, everything just runs smoother.
Exactly. And the document, it argues that this kind of like cognitive maturity, it's not just essential for us as humans, but for the AI we're building too.
So we don't just want AI that's smart. We want AI that's what? Wise.
In a sense, yeah. We're
Yeah.
talking about building AI that can handle nuance, different perspectives,
Yeah.
that can even question its own programming if it needs to.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So how do we even start to design AI with those abilities? It's not like we can just like download wisdom onto a microchip, right?
You're right, it's definitely not that simple.
Yeah.
And that's where this other model comes in spiral dynamics.
Ah, yes, spiral dynamics. I've dipped my toes into that a bit. It's like this big, grand staircase of how people and even whole societies like evolve their ways of thinking,
It's
right?
a really helpful framework for getting why people see the world so differently. It's not that one level is better than another. It's more like each level has its own values, its own priorities, even its own ways of understanding information.
And a lot of times those different levels, they clash. It's like two people looking at the same thing but seeing two totally different realities.
Exactly. The document actually calls this the multipolar trap. Different groups, each with their own strong beliefs, and none of them able to agree on a solution. A recipe for gridlock.
Which, let's be real, describes a lot of the world today. So if just reaching these higher levels of development isn't enough, how do we break out of these traps?
That is the question, isn't it? But the document, it suggests a really interesting answer. Boundary objects. And they might be more common than you think.
Okay, you've got my attention. Boundary objects. Tell me more.
Think of it like a shared language, a common goal, maybe even a simple tool that can help people from different backgrounds find some common ground. It's a way to bridge those divides without needing everyone to suddenly see eye to eye on everything.
So not about erasing differences, but finding ways to work together in spite of them. I like that. Got a real-world example of this.
Sure, the document talks about Joseph Lister. He was the surgeon who pioneered antiseptic techniques,
Oh, wow. So like back when surgery was basically done in a butcher shop.
pretty much. And when Lister first tried to bring in antiseptics, people pushed back hard. It challenged everything they thought they knew.
Well, yeah, people generally don't like having their worldview flipped on its head. So what did he do?
Well, instead of trying to change everyone's minds about germs overnight, he focused on things like, sterile gowns and gloves. Practices that, yes, they promoted hygiene, but they didn't directly contradict what people already believed at the time.
Ah, so it's like, let's all agree to wash our hands first, and then we can argue about the existence of invisible microbes later.
Exactly. These practices, they became those boundary objects, a way to bring in change more gradually, building on what's already there instead of just like bulldozing everything.
So we've got these stages of thinking, clashing worldviews and these boundary objects trying to bridge the gaps. But how do we actually use all of this to build AI that's not just intelligent, but actually anti-fragile, like our buddy Lister with his clean surgery crusade?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? And the document seems to suggest that a big part of it has to do with remember those information immune systems we were talking about? Those filters that make us reject anything that doesn't fit with our current worldview.
Right, right. Like trying to convince someone that their favorite social media app is actually, not good for them. Total brick wall.
Exactly. But imagine if we could design AI that could actually see those filters, and not just see them, but understand the why behind them. AI that could predict what information someone might reject, just based on their stage of development or their cultural background.
So instead of just like bulldozing people with information, it'd be more like the AI becomes this master persuader, framing things in a way that actually makes sense to the person hearing it based on what they already understand.
Yeah, exactly. Like having AI be that friend who can explain things to your grandpa in a way he understands, but without making him feel talked down to.
Now, that is a valuable friend. But this whole thing about AI tailoring its communication, it kind of makes you wonder, where's the line between understanding and manipulation?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And the document does acknowledge that concern. But think about it this way. Us humans, we've always struggled with persuasion, communication, even just understanding each other. We're kind of messy, emotional creatures.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. Just look at any comment section online.
Right. So what if AI, done ethically, of course, could actually help us become better communicators, help us bridge those divides and have more productive conversations, even when we disagree?
So it's not about AI taking over the conversation. It's more about it raising the bar for how we talk to each other. I like that.
And it kind of ties into another important point the document makes about expanding our cone of care.
Ah, yes. It's like that saying, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. We can't exactly care for the whole world if we haven't figured out how to care for ourselves and the people closest to us first, right?
Exactly. It's like ripples in a pond. You start with yourself, then family and friends, then maybe your community. And as we grow, that circle of care, it gets bigger.
And the document seems to be saying that this whole expanding cone of care thing, it goes hand in hand with reaching those higher levels of development we were talking about before.
Absolutely. Because to really connect with and care for people who are different from us, to truly understand their point of view, it takes a certain level of cognitive flexibility. It's that self-authoring stage coming into play. You're able to hold multiple truths and empathize with others without losing yourself in the process.
It's like that aha moment when you realize that people who disagree with you aren't necessarily bad or wrong. They just have different experiences and values. And suddenly the world gets a whole lot more interesting.
Precisely. And if we want to build AI that can actually handle the complexities of the world, it can't just be smart in the traditional sense. It needs to be able to navigate these more, I don't know, humane, compassionate ways of being, just like we try to do ourselves.
So it's not just about building AI, it's about building a reflection of our best selves. At least that's the hope.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And I think this document lays out a really solid path for getting there.
It's funny, we always talk about AI as this like disruptive force, right? This thing that's going to come in and shake everything up. And while that's probably true, but this research, it's got me thinking about it less like a disruption and more like an invitation, you know?
Invitation.
Yeah, because on the one hand, we're trying to build AI to solve problems, obviously, but maybe in that process, it can actually help us humans level up a bit too. Like AI is this mirror, right? It's reflecting not just how clever we are, but also our blind spots, those places where we get stuck.
So AI is like this giant magnifying glass on human nature, making us look at the good and the bad.
Yes. Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, that self-awareness, that's what we need to get back on track. And not just for ourselves, but for, everyone who comes after us, whoever inherits all this stuff we're creating, it makes you realize the responsibility that comes with all of this.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And the document doesn't shy away from that at all. It actually says AI isn't just a tool, it's a medium.
Okay, now hold on. When I hear medium, I'm thinking like tarot cards, crystal balls.
Right. But think of it this way. Language, that's a medium. It lets us share ideas, tell stories, all of that. But the words we use, how we put those words together, it actually shapes how we think, doesn't it?
You're saying AI, like language, it's not this neutral thing, right? It inherently carries a message. It shapes how we see the world.
Exactly. It actually quotes Marshall McLuhan here. He's the one who said, the medium is the message, right? Think about it. Every new way of communicating, from the printing press to the radio, it changes how we understand information.
Okay, so if AI is the medium, what's the message? And maybe more importantly, who's writing it?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the answer is, at least partly, it's us. We're the ones writing the code, feeding it the data, deciding what it should be doing.
Which means we got to be so careful about the values we're putting into these systems, right? If we're not, we could end up just making the same mistakes all over again, but on a bigger scale.
Totally. And that brings us right back to anti-fragility. It's not enough to build AI that's just smart or efficient, We have to build AI that lines up with our best selves, that helps us be more understanding, more collaborative, more able to deal with all the crazy complexity out there.
So it's not about AI making us better at what we already do. It's about AI helping us become, well, better people.
Exactly. And that's a future worth working towards.
Absolutely. So anyone listening, if your brain is a little, I don't know, fried from all these mind-bending ideas we've been throwing around.
And hopefully feeling a little hopeful about what's possible.
Exactly. Here's one last thing to think about. We've been talking about building anti-fragile AI, right? But what if each of us took some time to think about how we can cultivate a bit of that anti-fragility in ourselves?
Yeah. How can we be more adaptable, more resilient, more open to learning and growing from the tough stuff?
How can we expand our own circles of care, not just for ourselves and the people we're close to, but for the world as a whole? Because at the end of the day, building a better future, it starts with each of us. It starts with that journey of growth and understanding.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Keep those questions coming, and remember, there's always more to explore.